This time, the sentence is devoid of feeling. It is intentional, defensive, sharp, HIV-free, and crime-free. This arrest is incorrect. According to reports circulating online, Mendeecees is no longer remaining silent while his name is dragged through speculation, accusations, and what he believes to be a deliberate attempt to erase his career. This is why the claim is currently tearing through blog timelines and reaction channels, not as a confirmed fact but as a response. This new surge of turmoil, according to fans, didn't begin haphazardly after a Weird Geneva podcast. Mendeecees supposedly felt constrained by narrative rather than evidence as the discourse changed and rumors began to sound more like conclusions rather than whispers, and the internet took notice. Social media commentary claims that Mendeecees is now telling those close to him that the HIV story isn't true. It's retaliation, that the arrest wasn't justice. It was timing, and that Tamar Braxton, overwhelmed by her own backlash, is turning the spotlight on him to deflect the damage. Fans are taken aback not only by what is being stated, but also by how quickly the plot changed. The internet is analyzing Tamar's emotional outburst at one point. The following hearing asserts that Mendeecees is the true target and that he is being misrepresented. No crime, no diagnosis, just a public disintegration driven by pressure and conjecture. According to reports, Mendeecees thinks that all of this stems from the podcast moment when discussion became context and context became rumor fuel. According to reports, he believes the story was predetermined before he even spoke, that the internet determined who he was without waiting for information once his name was mentioned. Behind the scenes, feelings were running hot. Friends reportedly advised him to keep silent. Family was concerned that talking would simply fuel the flames. However, HIV claims started to circulate along with arrest discussion. Silence began to feel more like surrender than defense. At that point, the denial allegedly came as a pushback rather than an apology or clarification, because this is no longer just rumor. If, as some fans claim, this is a smear campaign. According to sources, it's reputation warfare, and commentary spaces are currently overflowing. Mendeecees has had enough of having his fate written by others. Based on the growing amount of online conversation, the mood surrounding the incident changed almost immediately when the denial started to spread. This was not a cool-headed explanation. Official channels, frustration, incredulity, and the sense of being trapped by an uncontrollable plot all contributed to the defensive narrative that was developing in real time. According to commenting sections, Mendeecees was taken aback by how quickly his name was linked to claims that had lasting consequences. They say he was responding to a build-up rather than a single headline. The podcast discussion occurred first, followed by conjecture. Interpretation followed, and at last there were rumors that don't go away. The change was also observed by spectators outside. Timelines that had been centered on Tamar's poignant moment abruptly changed course. Questions began to arise. Why was Mendeecees being drawn into this with such vigor? Why were health claims being discussed without verification? Music, and why did the arrest discussion coincide with the escalation of the blame narrative? Amends apparently warned those close to him that the arrest was being presented in the worst possible light, not as an ongoing legal problem, but rather as evidence of guilt. According to reports making the rounds in fan communities, he believed that the internet stopped posing queries and began making judgments as soon as the word arrest was mentioned. Anger enters the picture at that point. According to commenting outlets, he thinks the timing isn't coincidental. The attention abruptly shifted to Tamar as the public's sympathy started to wane. Regardless of the facts, fans claim he is positioned as the antagonist in a plot that needed one. Behind closed doors, emotions ran hot. Family members were reportedly concerned about long-term repercussions as well as public opinion. According to individuals closely following the situation, this kind of linkage is difficult for careers to recover from. Doors can open or close based on even unverified assertions. The intensity of the denial currently circulating online, according to supporters, is explained by this. This isn't about winning an argument, they say. It's about getting by. About resisting before being silent is taken as an acknowledgement. The degree to which the matter has turned personal has stunned fans. What began as critique has evolved into a struggle for control of the narrative. An emotional outburst can be viewed in 100 different ways on one side. Conversely, a vigorous denial of the criminal implications associated with his name, as well as the health claims. Online conversations and reports suggest that Funky's podcast offered a framework on which individuals could build anything because specific allegations were made. But the audience filled in the spaces once proximity and discomfort were mentioned. Facts were not necessary for rumors. All they needed was room. According to blog sources who are not friends with Mendeecees, he is particularly irritated by how quickly implication took the place of verification. He claims that once the HIV narrative emerged, It stopped being about discussion and started being about destruction. Reputations don't get the benefit of the doubt when certain words are spoken. This is where the claim of targeting enters the conversation report, suggesting that Mendeecees feels that Tamar are under intense through an emotional response rather than a well-thought-out strategy. Pressure herself shifted attention outward. His supporters contend that when someone feels attacked, they occasionally react in the most harmful way possible. That framing is highly disagreed with by others. Critics contend that refuting statements does not lessen their significance. They draw attention to the fact that emotional interactions still have repercussions, and that self-serving defense tales are also possible. Another round of discussion is sparked by this conflict of interpretations. Mendeecees is now speaking, according to some supporters, because the stakes were too high. Arrest talk, criminal consequences, and health accusations. Silence becomes harmful when those factors come together. Some contend that speech now appears reactive, as though damage control was implemented too late. According to the sources, Mendeecees maintains that the arrest itself is being distorted, that legal procedures do not equate to guilt, that using the word arrest as a shorthand for wrongdoing overlooks context, and that it is not the smoking gun that some online are portraying it as. The general public hasn't yet. Some viewers find resonance in this insistence. They draw attention to how frequently headlines about arrests eclipse actual results, how fast suspicion solidifies once a story feels emotionally fulfilling, and how infrequently follow-ups go as far as initial perceptions. Viewers pay close attention to how polarized the reaction gets. Mendeecees is being unfairly portrayed, according to one side. According to the other, denial is precisely what a person in this situation would say. Both parties believe they are justified. There is no confirmation from either side, and the unsettling reality that nothing is resolved lies in the middle of it all. Commentary claims that Mendeecees believes his former silence was interpreted as a sign of weakness and that it allowed others to define him. He is now attempting to regain control before the tale solidifies itself by refuting both the HIV allegation and the criminal storyline. The audience is captivated by the emotional impact of this event. It goes beyond what is being said. It has to do with why it is being spoken at this time. Concerning reputation, fear, on the speed at which public opinion shifts from curiosity to conviction. This seems familiar to those who have watched reality TV for years. The rapid change in who is trusted and who is not. The alliances, the escalation. However, the gravity of the consequences is what sets this apart. Moral judgment, criminality, and health. These plots don't start over in the following season. One thing is evident as the responses keep coming in. There are no well-defined heroes and antagonists in this story. Every fresh denial or accusation adds another layer to the complicated, emotional, and unresolved situation. Fans are left without clarity, observing a situation in which both parties claim injury, both parties accuse the other of misrepresenting the facts, and they both feel trapped in unfavorable situations. What happens next will determine whether this concludes with clarification or keeps spiraling out of control. However, for the time being, the story is in that awkward place where accusations and denial coexist, and the internet won't wait for clarification before making a judgment. The online debate becomes increasingly heated and fragmented as the denial spreads. What appeared to be a single controversy is now perceived as the simultaneous collision of several tales. Fans are responding to more than just what Mendeecees is purportedly saying. They are responding to the implications of everything that preceded it. People close to Mendeecees claim on social media that he feels deceived, not only by the rumors themselves, but also by how readily they were accepted. According to him, followers claim that this is the point at which the arrest story takes center stage. This is the point at which the arrest story takes center stage. According to commentary pages, Mendeecees is irritated by the way the word arrest was weaponized, left unexplained and uncontextualized, and just dropped into headlines like a verdict. Reports state that he maintains the incident was not even close to as dramatic as it was shown. However, nuance had no chance once that word became viral on social media. Supporters' emotions were running high as they perceived the emergence of yet another well-known pattern. They emphasized how frequently arrests are exploited as a stand-in for guilt, particularly when they are combined with scandal. When the internet makes connections, even fictitious ones, ceases awaiting verification. This is also the point at which Funky's podcast's significance resurfaces. Fans argue about it non-stop. Some claim it was little more than commentary. Others maintain that it unintentionally opened a door. Online conversations indicate that Mendeecees believes that although the podcast didn't outright accuse him of anything, it changed people's perceptions by encouraging speculation, assumption, and the use of worst-case scenarios to fill in the spaces. Funky's supporters fiercely retaliate. They believe he never brought up his health, never accused anyone of a crime, and never claimed to be aware of anything unlawful. However, detractors contend that impact is not eliminated by purpose. Audiences take it farther on their own after a public figure is discussed in a particular way. The assertions on Tamar's motivation are directly influenced by this tension. Rumor has it that Mendeecees thinks Tamar thought her own story was getting out of hand. Sympathy was no longer assured after her poignant moment went viral. There were more questions. Opponents were more vocal. Fans claim that he thinks the emphasis changed in that setting. Emotionally diverted, but not purposefully intended. Mendeecees' proponents contend that people don't always select the most hygienic course of action when pressure becomes intolerable. The loudest is their choice. Additionally, they think that in this instance, the HIV charge served as shock value, something that would instantly alter the discourse and divert focus from investigation. There is a great deal of disagreement among aficionados about this interpretation. Some maintain that suggesting motivation without evidence is risky and unfair. They contend that presuming purpose merely increases conjecture over a now already unstable circumstances. Others argue that purpose is precisely the subject of debate rather than proof. Perception, not judgments, is the focus of such commentary. Blogs monitoring the fallout claim that the denial has also increased behind-the-scenes discussions. Restraint is reportedly being urged by friends on both sides. There are rumors that solicitors are recommending silence. Families are allegedly concerned about long-term harm, including emotional harm in addition to reputational harm. The human cost starts to become apparent at this point. Both sides seem worn out. According to observers who are paying careful attention, not in public remarks, but in their absence, the silence that feels more like overwhelm than strategy, the lack of follow-up, and the reluctance to give fuel. However, the internet doesn't reduce your speed. Videos of reactions proliferate. They all present the denial in different ways. It is regarded by some as evidence of innocence. Some perceive it as a textbook diversion. Analysis is done on body language. Tone is examined closely. Even the silence becomes interpretive material. The speed at which certainty takes the place of wonder astounds fans. Mendeecees supposedly feels caught in a dilemma. According to reports, speaking puts you at risk for escalation. Assumptions are encouraged by silence. Skepticism is encouraged by denial. Every choice seems like a loss. This, according to his supporters, explains why his internet answer was so direct, emotionless, and rigid. According to reports, he doesn't want to dispute specifics in public. He wishes to prevent the narrative from developing. However, detractors contend that failing to provide an explanation allows for too much conjecture. Furthermore, denial by itself seldom ends speculation once it has taken root. Fans' responses became more intimate. Some people can relate to the experience of being misinterpreted and having their name altered by strangers. Some who sympathize with Tamar's suffering contend that emotional responses are not random. This gap in empathy widens. The divide, the lack of concrete facts is what makes everything more difficult. Just claims answering claims, no paperwork, no confirmations, no official deadlines. Emotion responds to emotion. Commentary pages on perception versus perception. Keep in mind that this is where reality TV culture clashes with actual repercussions. Dramatic arcs that reset are familiar to viewers. Confessions followed by apologies, arguments that are settled on television. But this circumstance doesn't act like a plot. There is no moderator, no reunion episode, and no obvious conclusion. Supporters start to notice that what they're witnessing doesn't end nicely. Online conversations claim that Mendeecees is concerned that the harm would persist even if everything is later clarified. Clips do not retract, and screenshots do not vanish. First impressions are difficult to dispel. Many viewers can relate to this anxiety. They realize the power of storytelling, particularly when they involve criminality and health. Once those statements are affixed to a name, they continue to reverberate long after denials have subsided. Some supporters make an effort to slow down the discussion. They remind others that these voices are frequently muffled by louder emotions, that reports are not judgments, that commentary is not confirmation, and that emotional moments are not proof. The denial opens a new chapter rather than closing the last one. Now, what was said isn't the only part of the tale. It concerns who is in charge of meaning, who is trusted, and how rapidly sympathy changes based on framing. Fans are left to witness an uncertain standoff. While one side maintains innocence, the other demands that suffering be acknowledged. And in between them, an internet that seldom waits for clarification before selecting the narrative that seems most appropriate. One thing is becoming more and more evident as the drama progresses. The perceptions become more enduring the longer this is left unsolved. And that can be the most detrimental result for all parties. The plot starts to change in unforeseen ways when the argument doesn't go away. What used to be a boisterous exchange of charges and denials now becomes more subdued, weighty, and unnerving. Instead of focusing on what was said, fans now want to know how this scenario is affecting all parties. Mendeecees allegedly feels the burden of being judged without a trial taking place in real time. According to continuing internet criticism, according to those close to him, he is witnessing his name become synonymous with scandal. He maintains that the accusations against him have not been substantiated. Supporters contend that this phase of public controversy is the riskiest. Fans note how fast timescales shift from inquiry to conviction when perception takes the role of process. Questions are no longer asked in posts. They say things. Remarks don't wonder. They say. Additionally, each denial he is supposed to make is interpreted as proof that something needs to be concealed rather than as a counter-argument. As this realization spread, feelings were running high. Discussions in fan communities indicate that everyone feels that everything has been made worse by the official source's silence. Worse, no definitive adjustments, no clear statements. The internet quickly fills the void. This is precisely how narratives get out of control. According to supporters, the absence, not the facts. In the meantime, Tamar's emphasis gets even more intricate. A few admirers start wondering if the predicament she contributed to getting worse has trapped her as well. They make the argument that the person at the center of an emotional moment loses ownership once it gets viral. Tamar's supporters contend that she never requested that her suffering be examined in this manner. Opponents argue that emotional remarks made in public don't have the right to remain private. People's perceptions of everything she does after that are altered by this tension. Every time she is silent, it is examined. Every delay is discussed. Some admirers claim she's safeguarding her mental health because she's overburdened. Some say she's evading responsibility. Once more, depending on one's pre-existing beliefs, the same behavior can lead to opposing conclusions. Given that this fans start bringing the past into the present as the back and forth gets more intense. Old videos, old interviews, ancient disputes. Everything becomes proof that is retroactive. People begin to rewrite history to suit their emotions. This is the point at which exhaustion sets in. Longtime watchers acknowledge that watching speculation mount on top of speculation wears them out rather than entertaining or shocking them. They claim that the drama is no longer enjoyable. It feels intrusive, like seeing a gradual deterioration rather than a spectacular explosion. Online reports claim that Mendeecees too experiences this weariness. His supporters claim that he is annoyed because the story doesn't stop, regardless of what he does. People accuse him of lying when he denies. People accuse him of hiding if he doesn't say anything. People accuse him of deflecting when he defends himself. There isn't a safe answer. When the topic of arrests comes up again, this feeling of inevitability intensifies. With reused presumptions rather than fresh information, fans observe the abrupt framing of seemingly unrelated occurrences as interrelated. Timelines were pieced together using conjecture rather than proof. Tamar's supporters contend that suffering should be believed rather than questioned. Demanding accuracy from someone who is hurt, they say, is pointless. Opponents vehemently contend that unclear beliefs run the risk of injustice. Moral justification is felt by both sides. Both parties don't feel heard. This gap becomes more pronounced. People cease trying to comprehend. They fight to protect their places. Comment sections get antagonistic. Nuance breaks down. The middle ground vanishes. It becomes impossible to overlook the role of media culture in the backdrop. Fans start to wonder how much accountability platforms have for amplifying pieces without context. Headlines that are meant to provoke rather than educate, reaction videos, and snippets of quotes. Everyone involved, according to some observers, has turned into collateral in a system that encourages indignation. They claim that the algorithm doesn't give a damn about who is correct. Pain is what keeps people watching, and it cares who keeps them watching. Some viewers' interpretation of the entire incident is altered by this realization. Rather of taking sides, people begin to doubt the organization itself. Why do emotional breakdowns lead to contentment? Why does silence raise suspicions? Why does denial turn into guilt? Why, if it comes at all, clarity comes last. However, the machine doesn't slow down as this awareness increases. There are always new videos coming out. Demand is the reason, not fresh information. Request updates. Request responses. Demand, seek assurance when there isn't any. Mendeecees is said to believe that his identity is being diminished by the narrative. No longer a multifaceted individual, but a simple victim or villain, guilty or innocent reduced to a headline rather than a real person. This is the true damage. According to his sympathetic fans, psychological as well as reputational, being discussed without being heard and being condemned without being acknowledged. Some contend that Tamar is going through the same thing, that her suffering has been reduced to a show, and that rather than being a call for help, her emotional moment has become a permanent name. The audience is perplexed by this mirroring. Damage is claimed by both parties. Misrepresentation is alleged by both parties. Narratives that are bigger than themselves seem to obliterate both sides. The internet, however, insists on a winner. As this section of the narrative progresses, it is evident that a swift resolution is not in sight. There aren't any tidy statements that wrap things up. There are no conclusive answers that satisfy everyone. It's just an increasing awareness that the damage is more irreversible the longer this goes on. Fans start to realize that not all stories have a happy ending. They have scars at the end. And the most disturbing realization dawns as the cacophony persists. The facts no longer support this drama. Belief, emotion, and repetition are what keep it going, and it becomes more difficult than anyone wants to acknowledge to bring a story back to reality once it reaches that point. There is a small but significant shift in the way people discuss things as the discussion veers further into doubt. Instead of responding with explosive confidence, the tone changes from fury to uneasiness. They're responding hesitantly, and that hesitancy conveys more information than any headline could. This is the point at when damage becomes accepted, according to continuing discourse. Not loud, not dramatic, simply accepted. Although names no longer have a strong trend, the associations still exist. It is no longer necessary to provide context while discussing even if no one can agree on what exactly happened, everyone already knows the tale. Supporters claim that this is just what he was afraid of. According to websites, some close to him claim he feels as though his reputation is gradually deteriorating rather than abruptly collapsing. There isn't just one time to fight, no specific charge to refute, just a cloud that travels with him. Interviews are stressful. Mentions seem heavy. It seems strange to be silent. Moreover, the cloud gets heavier the longer it is unclear. Fans begin to see how the narrative has subtly changed how people behave. Reaction channels start to exercise caution. The language gets more protective, not because fresh information has surfaced, but rather because it is now hard to disregard ambiguity. Phrases like allegedly and reportedly are used more frequently. Many viewers start re-evaluating the arrest story. At this point, online conversations reveal that several fans acknowledge that when they initially learned about it, they experienced emotional reactions. The combination of scandal and legal issues seemed plausible, but as time passes, doubts begin to surface. Why are the details unclear? Why are timelines inconsistent? Why does everything seem to be assumed rather than clarified? Others fiercely oppose this re-evaluation. They contend that challenging narratives compromises accountability and that waiting for clarification may appear to minimize harm. Once more, the audience is divided between being cautious and conviction. Tamar's part in the developing narrative feels unresolved in the background. Supporters contend that she is bearing an invisible burden and that anyone might be broken by being the subject of rumors. They think her emotional moment was never intended to last. Emotional times, according to critics, are not exempt from consequences. Impact is more important than aim. Once more, the two sides speak over one another. The conversation's energy is altered by this impasse. It starts to focus more on philosophy than facts. Verification versus belief. Empathy versus accountability. Speech versus silence. Fans start posing more general queries about these people, as well as the culture in which they are observed. When did reflection give way to reaction? When did feeling turn into proof? When was speculation considered a legitimate kind of payment? Some observers say that this circumstance highlights a weakness in contemporary media consumption. The pace, the absence of hesitation, the need for a conclusion before knowledge is available. They claim that because waiting is ineffective, the internet doesn't wait. Others contend that prominent individuals have to acknowledge this fact, that exposure comes at the expense of attention, and that managing disorder is a requirement of their contract. Online discussion claims that even they acknowledge that some storms feel exaggerated. According to reports, Mendeecees believes that everyone involved no longer owns the tale. Not to Tamar, not to him, not even to the people who initially brought it up. The audience now owns it, shaped more by interpretation than by facts. A sort of resignation is brought on by this realization. This, according to his supporters, is the reason he hasn't kept replying aggressively, not because he has nothing to say, but rather because he is aware that debating perception is rarely fruitful. Logic finds it difficult to compete once people believe something to be true. Supporters observe the apparent retreat into silence on both sides. Just fewer appearances, remarks, and reactions, not catastrophic departures. The voices in the middle diminish, but the noise persists. This absence tells a story of its own. Some see it as self-preservation, some as emotional exhaustion, some as guilt, and some as a legal tactic. Once more, the viewer transforms the same silence into anything they require. In the meantime, the internet keeps recycling, reframing, and reinterpreting. New captions are added to old videos. Moments from the past are given new significance. The weight of contemporary belief causes everything to become pliable. The tale takes on its most perilous aspect at this point. It's a quiet assumption rather than an aggressive scandal. Even if announcements were made tomorrow, fans would start to recognize that. The impression would not entirely go away even if explanations and facts were provided. First tales are more durable than adjustments. Emotion moves more quickly than words. This comprehension brings forth an odd serenity. A dreary realization that something irreversible has already occurred takes the place of the fury. As it fades, careers will progress in different ways. Names will now have more weight than they had previously. There will always be an unspoken asterisk in conversations, and nobody seems to be able to completely avoid it. As this stage comes to an end, viewers are left feeling uneasy rather than with answers. Uncomfortable with how fast belief takes the place of evidence, how quiet turns into guilt, and how emotion turns into judgment, and how easily stories may spiral out of hand. There is no resolution to the story. It waits for something conclusive, a declaration, a breakthrough, an affirmation. Or perhaps simply enough time for focus to shift. All that's left is a reminder. Till then, truth frequently comes late in a world where people are motivated by reaction.